I received a complimentary review copy of Rolling Realms from the publisher in exchange for an honest review, so thank you to Stonemaier Games. I'm going to open the review with the hook, the thing about the game which is going to draw players in. So it's a roll and write game, and we've seen many of those before, but this one has modular scoring, just like that seen in Cartographers. It has a modular player interface, like that seen in Silver and Gold, but it's rare to see these two things pulled together into one game. So I guess that's the hook. A bit weak? Okay, well let's try again. So it's a roll and write game with different modules inspired by each of Stonemeier's greatest hits. Yes, I think that's probably the real hook. I'm Adam Porter, I design games, and this is a different sort of review because we're going to be taking a look at a tabletop game but analysing it primarily as a product. Over recent months I've been making regular videos covering all aspects of product design, and in this series of reviews I'll be applying all the things we've discussed. We'll talk about the gameplay too, so you should get an idea of whether the game might be fun for you. Rolling Realms is a 2021 release from designer Jamie Stonemaier from Stonemaier Games, with a great little backstory. So early in the COVID-19 pandemic, Jamie set about creating a free print-and-play game which could be played via Facebook Live. The game was a simple roll and write game, and it evolved and grew as the pandemic dragged on. Stonemaier already have a strong community, but this game brought together many fans of the company who playtested the game via their home-printed copies and fed back constantly to the company. There was never any intent of formally publishing this game, but by mid-2021 the demand was apparent and Stonemaier decided to make a full production version available to purchase. Rolling Realms is a game for 1 to 6 players. At the start of each round, 3 cards are chosen, which will set the scoring criteria for the round. Each card represents a realm, which takes its inspiration from a past Stonemaier game. Each player gets a copy of each of these cards to work with, and each round lasts 9 turns. At the start of a turn, 2 dice are rolled. All players then use these dice results to fill in sections of their cards. For example, a die showing a 4 might allow you to cross off the 4 result on one of your realms. Each die can only be used once, and you can only fill in 1 value on each of the realms per turn. So essentially you have to allocate 1 dice result to one of your realms, and then the other dice result to a different realm. Often, filling in the realms generates you resources, which are marked onto a separate card by circling them. And later in the game you can cross off resources in order to use them to manipulate dice results. Each of the realms works differently, generating you resources in different ways, and ultimately scoring you stars which are marked along the bottom of the realm card. After 9 turns, the round ends, and players total up their stars for the round, adding additional points for leftover resources. 2 more rounds are played using different realms, and scores are totaled to determine the winner. The introductory blurb from the rulebook describes the game as an infinitely scaling roll and write game, which is a little bit odd, because the game is actually limited to a maximum of 6 players, because there are only 6 sets of cards included. Sure, you could buy more copies to play the game with larger numbers, as the back of the box suggests, but it seems like a bit of an odd selling point to advertise, when the vast majority of roll and writes are genuinely infinitely scalable, because each player only needs a single sheet of paper torn off of a pad. And this is one of the few games in the genre where player count is actually limited. I want to try and describe my experience with the game from the very start, to form a customer journey map. The start of that journey is a little bit fuzzy for me though, because I didn't have the genuine customer experience of picking up the game from a store shelf, considering my purchase, and handing over cash for it. The game was generously provided to me by the publisher, so I'll have to start with my initial contact with the game upon opening the package which arrived in the post. The first thing that struck me was the size of the box. The game is small by Stonemaier standards, but it's large in comparison to others in the genre. It's considerably bigger than Quix and Quinto, the microscopic first wave of the current roll and write trend. It considerably outsizes Silver and Gold, and Ganz Schön Clever, and the myriad of Schmidt-Spieler roll and writes. The box is a similar surface dimension to Welcome To, but it's considerably deeper. I tend to think of roll and writes as small box experiences, the sort of things you'd tuck into a backpack and take on a holiday, maybe playing a game or two in a cafe or at the airport or on a train. Rolling Realms is a little bit unwieldy for that. Now I understand that the intention is for the game to be expandable, with space for additional materials within the base game box, and that makes sense. Recently, this Kickstarter behemoth arrived in the post. Cartographers has gone from this to this, and the later box is packed with expansion content. Suddenly, Rolling Realms seems positively unassuming. And honestly, unassuming is the word I'd use for the cover art here too. We've got none of the lavish illustrations that adorn the boxes of Scythe or Wingspan, none of the bright colours splashed over the covers of Euphoria or Red Rising. Instead, we've got a simple bit of graphic design with a charming illustration that's a little bit hard to make out. The composition has an air of school textbook about it. I'm a big fan of game boxes which give an accurate depiction of what you're going to be doing in the game, or even better, how you're going to feel. So Welcome To has a town planner laden with papers, and indeed you do feel a bit like you're laying out a neighbourhood on the page. Well, sort of. And the Cartographers cover has a wise-looking elf and an imp plotting landscapes on a scroll of paper. And indeed, you do feel like you're creating maps as you play. Well, sort of. Ganz Schön Clever and Quicks lean right into their total lack of theming and feature dynamic images of coloured dice and spreadsheets. To be honest, those two covers are virtually indistinguishable. Rolling Realms falls somewhat awkwardly between two stools. It's an entirely abstract game. There's no attempt to define what the players are doing or why. The most intriguing selling point of the game is the various realms inspired by different popular Stonemaier products. Yet, you really have to squint to find the references on the cover. The most iconic Stonemaier games, Scythe, Wingspan and Viticulture, all feature, but you'd have to really know what you're looking for. No casual Wingspan fan is going to pick this game up off the game store shelf and immediately make the connection. My initial responses to Rolling Realms weren't all that enthusiastic. I wanted to give it a try, but I wasn't really excited. Of course, the next part of the journey is learning the rules, and as with most Stonemaier products, the rulebook is pretty good. It has a weird page order though. We very quickly get into a very detailed example of play before we've learnt all the rules. The wide variety of different cards are explained before the resources, which are going to feature in every round of every game. I found myself flipping back and forth more than I would have liked. And one fundamental rule is totally left out, unless I've missed it. The rules ask players to mark various boxes and icons on the individual realms, but they don't mention that these boxes and icons can't be marked again. It's easy to extrapolate that information because I've played many roll and writes and worker placement games and I know how these sort of things work. But even for a veteran gamer like myself, I did end up watching Rodney Smith's Watch It Played video just to check I'd understood it all properly. I'd highly recommend doing the same, by the way. These instructional videos are very much appreciated and Rodney is the best in the business. All of this is not to say that Stonemaier have done a bad job with the onboarding process. Quite the opposite. They may not have made the game as appealing as it could have been for the casual shopper, but Jamie Stegmaier has masterfully created a community of players who will buy the game regardless of outward appearances. By the time the game was released, there was already a community of fans playing the game, discussing it online and sharing information. Through his various social media channels, as usual, Stegmaier has created a little army of brand advocates. The company is transparent and open, it responds to customer queries. They are industry leaders in that regard. Setting up the game is a breeze, but teaching it is a little bit trickier. Every round means teaching 3 new rules. None of them are complex, but it isn't as simple as teaching everything up front and then rinsing and repeating. One player needs to be on the ball to keep the game running smoothly. Now you'll notice on my customer journey map that interaction is a low point in the game. Like many roll and writes, your actions will have precisely 0 impact on the other players. A player will win or lose, and they'll have no idea until those end scores are revealed. This is an intentional design choice, of course. It allows the game to scale to large numbers of players. But if you're looking for an interactive experience, well, this isn't it. The main draw to return to the game for subsequent plays is to experience the many different card combinations. By mixing and matching 3 cards from 11, you've got 165 different combinations, only 3 of which will be used in any given game. Alternatively, you might like to play through the solitaire mini-golf format, where you're faced with 18 defined card combinations and specific objectives for each round. Some of these challenges really shake up the way you play the game and add even greater variety to the package. At one point I was feeling like this is Jamie Stegmaier's version of Freedom and Fries's 504. If we plot pain points onto the customer map, there aren't really any major problems. The rules could be better, but they're fine. There's no interaction, but that's a feature rather than a flaw. And I'm not desperate to tell everyone about the game and persuade people to play it with me, but I would always be up for playing if somebody else wanted to. In my video about engaging players, I described the 5 key facets of a board game which tend to hook me. So these are thematic immersion, meaningful interactions, challenge and stress, feedback, and meaningful choices. A game doesn't need to excel in all of these categories to keep me engaged, but featuring a number of these elements in any combination is likely to pull me in. If we allocate 0 to 3 points to each of these categories, we end up with a score out of 15, and a game which scores 10 or above is likely to be a real favourite with me. But Rolling Realms struggles a little bit. The lack of interaction and the lack of theme severely dents its chances of reaching the top of the ladder. It doesn't provide much in the way of invigorating aha moments. There's no real feedback aside from crossing off boxes and counting points. Not much in the way of a dopamine hit playing Rolling Realms. But I do appreciate the puzzle. It's challenging and there are some neat decisions to be made, especially in that solitaire mini-golf format. Perhaps this relatively low overall score explains why I don't really feel excited about the game. I think it will settle into my rotation of roll and writes alongside Quicks and Cartographers and Ganz Schön Clever and Welcome To, but I don't think it will always be the first of them that I reach for. Moving on to my product design checklist. Is the game innovative? No, I don't think so. The use of dry erase cards is fun and it hasn't been used often before, but here the cards are never held in hand, they're never piled up in a discard pile or drafted mid-round. Rolling Realms just isn't as dynamic as Silver and Gold, which is the game that inspired it. The mechanism of incorporating a modular rule and a modular playing surface into a single card is a nice twist, and it's a fun iteration on other games in the genre. Number 2, does it solve a need? Well, right now, not really. I mean, there are plenty of other roll and writes which offer up a similar experience. That said, it did solve a need in the early days of COVID-19, providing a print-and-play prototype which you could playtest across the globe with a world-famous game designer was a unique prospect and exactly the sort of distraction that gamers needed in a global pandemic. I'm not surprised that anybody involved in that process is keen to have a memento of the experience in the form of a boxed version of the game that they helped to create. Number 3, a great product grows with its user. The experience gets richer and deeper as they explore all the different features. Rolling Realms offers up variety with its multitude of card combinations, but I'm not sure that I'd call it a deep experience. It's not really a game that you can master. Jamie Stegmayer has indicated that there will be mini expansion packs, similarly sized to a Magic the Gathering booster, inspired by each new game released by Stonemaier. So each additional card will massively increase the number of possible card combinations, and it's going to increase the replayability of the game accordingly. It's a really clever design choice, enhancing the gameplay, providing an affordable purchase for fans of the game, and promoting Stonemaier products along the way. The size of the Rolling Realms game box suddenly makes a lot more sense when you hear about these future expansions they have planned. Number 4, branding. I think the game is a fascinating experiment with branding. Each card is named after an earlier game, and the nature of the card relates to the mechanisms in the game to which it relates. For example, on the Between Two Cities realm, you score points equal to the lower score of the 2 other realms used that round, just as you would score points for adjacent cities in the original game. Now, I'm a casual player of Stonemaier games. Wingspan aside, I've played most of the games only a handful of times, if at all, and I can't immediately connect the mechanisms on the realms to their big box counterparts. In the absence of any artwork to aid players in making the connection, I'm not sure how successful this approach will be, but I'm fascinated to monitor the development of the game and find out. I do wonder whether the lack of brand assets is a missed opportunity. A few distinctive bits of artwork from those famous games would really lift the experience. So let's return to that initial hook. A modular scoring system combined with a modular player interface. How strong an idea is that? Well, it's interesting, but I think it's really hard to communicate that to players. And as a result, I don't think it's a strong hook. So we're going to consider the more thematic hook, a roll and write game inspired by Stonemeier's greatest hits. Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool idea. So in terms of execution, well, I think the game's a bit less successful. The onboarding process was impressive. It was organic, it was never forced, but the aesthetics in the game are a little bit dull, and the branding is a little bit confused. The expansion potential does lift the product, but ultimately, the game sits in the darker green area of my grid. I don't see this game rising above the frontrunners in the roll and write category. That said, it is a really solid entry in the genre, and it does have some fun and surprising twists. It's got a great backstory, and it's got loads of potential to grow. If you feel like it might suit you, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.